Hi, this is Astro Indicator Update, Excursions into Practical Astrology. This is episode 48, and my name is Stephen, and today is Sunday, July 19th. And I have to tell you, I still have my cough. I'm in the middle of allergy season, and it affects my lungs, so just bear with me. So today we are going to look at Trump's astrology, and specifically he has a Neptune transit that is affecting his state of being this year and next year in particular. Then we're going to look at several articles. One is David Stockman commenting on Fauci. And then we have several items dealing with hydrochloroquine. Country comparison, op-ed piece questioning why it is being restricted. And then we'll look at our market update. As usual, the Dow, I'm going to add a couple charts, Tesla and Amazon, and then the regular markets we usually look at: gold, silver, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the US dollar. Okay, here's Trump. This is his natal chart in the middle. This is the position of the planets in the sky right now, or at least a few days ago. And the one aspect, or the one transit that to me stands out right now is this one right here. Because Trump has Sun-Moon opposition in his natal chart. And currently, the transit of Neptune right here is squaring his sun, and it is 90 degrees away from his moon, squaring his moon. So we have a T-square, is what it's called, to Neptune in the sky, for him. Well, what is the upside and downside of this? Well, we've talked about Neptune quite often in previous podcasts, mostly natally, in someone's natal chart. Bill Gates, Nancy Pelosi, there's several other people. By transit, with him right now, the upside is that a person over time expands their ability to feel more compassionate, more connected, more unified with the world in general. There is spiritual potential for greater kind of spiritual attunement. Sometimes people become more religious or more spiritual in their outlook, etc. And that's, to some extent, that's probably happening to Donald Trump. The downside, particularly in the early stages, which this is right now, this year, is that this Neptune energy for that period of time can create some degree of kind of unclarity. And that's kind of maybe the nicest way of saying it, particularly when it comes to the future, or, seeing things, how you want things to come together, and relative to the current situation, the current reality. So those things kind of are a little out of focus for someone with a strong Neptune transit, very frequently. This could be happening to him, I don't know. But there are some indications, which my articles deal with, where it seems like he, in my opinion, he could be taking more action, decisive action in certain areas right now, which I think would be very warranted given what is coming down the pipeline in our economy. Because we are approaching a true, I think, emergency situation with the number of people who are missing their mortgage payments, who are missing debt payments, etc. This is going to balloon from here on out because the stimulus, the CARES Act, the stimulus money has been used up in whatever fashion, and we can't just continue printing money forever. So one thing that I think would be sort of helpful from my perspective for President Trump would be in different areas to really review who is on his advisory group with the economy, with the pandemic, etc. And maybe mix it up. I know he's been shaking up his campaign staff, but it could happen in other areas as well. Again, relative to the economy, relative to dealing with, I think, the riots that are going on in many, many cities and so forth. So looking to outside trusted resources to help him clarify the existing reality and offer him a few other options of how things are, should be planned, might be very beneficial for him. And it would be beneficial for anyone with this transit, is what I'm saying, because there's some positives and there's some negatives that almost everyone has to deal with when they're going through a long Neptune transit, which he is. Okay, let's move on. Here's a fairly good article by David Stockman. David Stockman has been, a Washington insider, a Wall Street insider for many, many years. But in my book, he really hasn't been corrupted as much as many people have by, that close exposure. He was the budget director at a very young age in Reagan's administration. So, he's got the economic, wherewithal to see what's going on currently. And then he worked for 20 years on Wall Street. He's a Republican, kind of a moderate Republican. He's written a couple books that are fairly critical of Trump. But he's not a never Trumper or, Orange Man bad or anything like that. So in this article, he's taking aim at Dr. Fauci, and he is suggesting that Trump should really find somebody else. Not just criticize the guy, not just try to marginalize him on the pandemic steering committee or whatever it's called, but essentially get rid of him. And it's a very good article. I respect David Stockman. You can find this article at his website. It's kind of a long address. It's David Stockman's Contra Corner. David Stockman's Contra Corner is his website. One of the more interesting aspects of it, which I'll read out, is that let's see if I can find it here. Is this section right here. So he says, as to the silent spreaders trope, here is how the very head of the WHO's COVID-19 task force, Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove, I think, recently explained that transmission of the virus from asymptomatic patients appears to be very rare. Okay, this woman is the head of the task force of the World Health Organization. And this is the quote, even though he left out the quotes. It still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a second individual. Well, let that sink in a little bit, okay? This is, the opposite here is really the basis for shutting down businesses, keeping people in masks, restricting, maintaining social distancing, everything. And here she says it is a rare occurrence that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual. And he goes on to say, for crying out loud, that knocks the very rationale for stay-at-home orders to hundreds of millions of healthy citizens into a cocked hat. And he goes on. It's a very good article. I recommend it. Okay, let's move on. And this is from someone's Twitter feed who does seem to act as a clearinghouse for a lot of COVID research and information. So thank you. I think he could change his Twitter handle or whatever. Gummy Bear isn't the most, strongest PR name to use in the world. But he says he did this compilation, and he says, this has not been peer reviewed, but is just to be used as a general overview to recognize the differences between countries down here that use HCQ, hydrochloroquine, am I saying that right? HCQ, liberally. In fact, some countries give it away for free, like Costa Rica, and countries that have been restricting it. And this is, on this axis, this is the case fatality rate. So generally, I wouldn't buy into the figures exactly, but you see the general trend here, okay? If HCQ in particular the research seems to indicate if it's used early, not when people are very sick, but if it's used early and in conjunction with zinc and an antibiotic, it seems to be very effective. And we've got the data is really showing up now that this is true. Okay. Now, I had to include this one because this is a op-ed piece. John and Andy, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Schlafly, townhall.com, and it says it's time to take the bull by the horns to conquer the Wuhan virus. Okay, and they're saying this is that their recommendation to Trump is that there should be immediate public access to hydroxychloroquine. There, I got it right. And, so they go on and they talk about the research of HCQ. And then in the middle of the article, their slant on this is that there's definitely some political motives for restricting it to making the pandemic sound as bad as possible. And they note that last month in Oregon, the pharmacy board, for example, blocked HCQ access as follows. And they said the prescription orders for chloroquine or HCQ for the prevention or treatment of COVID-19 may only be dispensed if written for a patient enrolled in a clinical trial by an authorized investigation. This is a drug that's been around for 60 years. The FDA approved of it for the use of malaria something like 15 or 20 years ago. There's anecdotal evidence and even research evidence just coming out all the time that it is helpful, particularly in the early stages. And at this point, we need to get a handle on this. And, the death rates, the media tends to emphasize the cases and not the death rates. The death rates are way down from a few months ago. And we know that the fatality rates in the U.S. really are comparable to the common flu, okay? But people still get, a respiratory illness. And this can be helpful. And so in my book, there's just no reason why it's not widely available, like many other countries, which the research, the data points out has been very beneficial. Okay, last one, just because I like John Rappaport. John has a blog. His website is called nomorefakenews.com. I mean, he was way ahead of the curve on that. I mean, he's had that website for 10 years. nomorefakenews.com, and his primary focus of research is sort of the abuses of the medical industry, the pharmaceutical industry. Okay? So he's really studied past pandemic scares, swine flu, et cetera, et cetera. And in this article, he goes into basically saying the same thing that John Stockman was saying, David Stockman was saying. Okay, Fauci has to go. Okay, then Mr. President, you need to get some other advisors, other trusted insiders that that you can rely on to give you some information. And it fit in completely with what I see going on with Trump's astrology. Okay. So I thought this was to the point. It's worth reading. John Rappaport, nomorefakenews.com. Dispatches from the war, Mr. Trump, the enemy is deep inside the gate. And he's kind of pointing the finger at what he regards as sort of this medical industry tyranny that has almost taken over our country and is really, I think, potentially destroying our country given the economic impact tsunami that is coming down the pipe for us with, debt levels, the unemployment, etc. Okay, let's look at some charts. Dow Jones Industrials, here we go. We'll look at some dates. Oops, I don't have my notes out. Well, the Dow is being held up by the Fed, and the perception that the Fed is going to continue, supporting it with money, buying corporate bonds, buying ETFs, and so forth and so on. We really do not have a lot of strong astrology in this chart. Okay, a couple dates coming up around the 24th and the 31st, right here and here. If you've not looked at my blog before, all these vertical lines are related to the astrology of this particular market. And over time, I've been doing this for 25 years, studying this, I have seen important price action take place once, we hit that date. The market trend changes, the market trend goes up, and so forth. And so it's really important to apply these dates to the context that's evident with the context of the other technical indicators. It has to be combined. You have to see what's going on, whether the market's overbought from momentum indicators down here, okay, or it's oversold, or the pattern, it's bumping up against a pattern and could potentially break out, and we have an astro date coming up that essentially, if it does break through, let's say a resistance level, it's confirming the strength of that market, for example, okay? Right now with the Dow, we don't have a lot of strong astrology, so we fall back onto the technical indicators, the trend line, moving average, and so forth. Learning about the how to analyze things, the technical analysis and trading is very helpful. It's not difficult. It sounds difficult, it's not, okay? Particularly if you kind of stay with the basics. They can make it very complicated, but even the basics are worth learning, okay? This trend line, though, is very important, and I would say also this support level. Play the technicals here. From what I'm reading, it seems like the Federal Reserve is reducing their balance sheet and becoming less supportive of this market. And so just be safe, play it safe, use stops, etc. I included Tesla and then Amazon here because these are just markets that are have gone off the edge of reality. Tesla, from my understanding, has not made a 4-quarter profit ever. So a year-over-year profit. Maybe they've made quarterly profits now and then, but not 4 quarters in a row, okay? So this company is way out over its skis, is an expression in the trading world. And it's mostly, I think, being attributed to these new traders who are using the trading app Robinhood, on their smartphones, who just think, these people, generally speaking, think the markets only go up. And basically they look at trading as gambling. Quite a few people do. And they think that they can get out, when they need to, which sometimes does not happen. This market has doubled, okay, or maybe it's more than that. It's quadrupled from 400 to 1600, okay, in a matter of a month. If there was ever a market that's going to correct and pull back, it looks like this one, okay? This is the weekly chart of, it's more than a month. I forgot this was the weekly chart of Tesla. So it's been about 4 months and it's quadrupled, 400%. There's an extreme, what's called a divergence in the technicals here, where you see the price action going up, but the momentum indicator is pointing down. Okay, that's a kind of the first red flag that something is not quite kosher in this market. So be careful if you are trading Tesla. That's all I can say. Amazon is in a similar boat. It's way overbought. Okay, I can probably draw these things in here. Okay, there you go. It's way overbought here, here. And what happened? Okay, when you get overbought, you tend to, something like that usually takes place. Okay, and we are at that point with Amazon. Now, I'm not an accountant, but I've read people who are much more skilled in that area than I am. And even Amazon has questionable accounting practices. And so it is really, it's something to consider if you are trading Amazon, whether you're trading just for a fast buck or whether you think that they actually have the earnings that they report that they have. But let's just leave it at that. Amazon is way overbought. It's ready for a pullback. The stock market, the Dow, NASDAQ are riding on about 4 or 5 stocks, okay? And if those 4 or 5 stocks pull back, you're going to get a big pullback. People are going to try to take money off the table. We are entering the weakest time period of the year for the indexes in general. So keep that also in mind. Okay, let's look at gold. Well, last week we had one of our stronger astrological dates coming up, and I took some time to talk about how we are overbought, though, in gold, not only in the daily chart, this is a daily chart, but also the weekly and the monthly chart. And, sometimes it can stay overbought, which it is right here. If you look at my cursor, it's relatively sort of high, not very high. It could get up into the 80s here. It's getting high, okay, but it's high in the weekly and monthly charts. So I said I was doubtful, really, that I kind of was leaning to that we might get a pop higher, but I was starting to, question that a little bit because of the momentum indicators. Well, now we're past this date. A couple days have passed. We're trying to stay above this trend line right there. We could easily pull back to the green one. That would be called a back test. Sometimes you have one back test, but every now and then you get 2. But we do have an intermarket situation with silver having a strong astro date early this week, tomorrow, Tuesday. So if silver continues going up, gold could pop higher. But we're due for a pullback. That's the bottom line with gold. And coming up, let me look at my notes here. Coming up, we have, we have some, astrology on the 22nd and actually the 24th. So 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. That has a characteristic of volatility to it or of changing trend direction. When we get later into August, some of the more bullish things kind of come back into play. But I would, just from the astrology, I would say later in this week, we may start seeing this pullback. And do I think it's going to be a large one? I don't. I think it just could come back to that trend line. It would be healthy for this market to come back a little bit. And you can play this a whole bunch of ways, and this is not trading advice, but just depending on your style of trading, you can take some profits, you can set some stops, you can ride it out and just be a buy and holder, because this market has a lot of continuing supportive astrology over the next several months. So just watch that. Okay, silver, I've already told you, silver has an astrology date tomorrow or Tuesday. When we look ahead, now silver is overbought on the daily chart as well, not so much on the weekly charts. When I look ahead, let's see, coming out to August 11th, we have some bullish things, but this is the one of the more primary bullish energy that we have, a few times a year, and it's coming at a time when we're likely not to see a lot of upward price movement because we're overbought. We'll see it play out. We may come up to this resistance line right there, and then we could come back and do a back test as well to this support level. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Okay, Bitcoin. Okay, this is a different situation than the gold and silver markets. Here we have a market that's just been, in a boring state for quite a while, trading sideways for months, going all the way back to May 1st. So, 3.5 months, almost 4 months of just trading sideways. However, we're at least set up at the moment for a sizable response in this market to the key dates that are approaching, because we have one on June 22nd, which is Wednesday. Yep, that's Wednesday. This one right here. And then we have some volatility kicking in next weekend. But then again, when you get out to, maybe I didn't draw it in here, early August, there are more bullish astro dates. So if you're into Bitcoin, Ethereum, you can see it's clear as a day. You can see we got support levels underneath this market. It's slightly weak because we're beneath the 50-day moving average, but we have some important dates coming up. My bias is that this is going to trade higher. Okay, I could be wrong, but I think the odds are on my side that could take place. That's my opinion. Trade it any way you want to trade it. Play it safe. Don't bet the farm or anything like that. But I really think a change in this sideways channel is going to happen this week. Same thing for Ethereum. It may follow Bitcoin if that's indeed what happens, but it has its own stronger key date coming up, and I'll confirm it. This is July 28th, and so yep, actually the 22nd is a fairly strong date, like Bitcoin, even though the energy's a little different here. But the price pattern you see is almost exactly the same. Once we break above this support level or this resistance line right there, this market should go higher. Okay, finally, let's look at the US dollar, because this is kind of interesting. It followed exactly what I said it would probably do last week. Once it broke below this trend line that I've drawn in there, that one, it headed down. We didn't see a big pop in gold, which is sometimes an inverse move to the US dollar. But now we're down to, trading at that level. I could have drawn in, one more support level right there. Okay. So it is kind of at another support level. I think this trend line is the more important one. So within the next few days, though, we could see, or maybe at the end of the week, we could see a bounce in the dollar. And that could happen on even this evening in the futures market. when markets open later this afternoon. I'm in Pacific Daylight Time right now. So this could happen. We could see a bounce this evening, and that could even carry forward. Maybe by the end of the week. I don't think the bounce will last a long time. It wouldn't surprise me at all for it to, move up to this back test, and then back test here, and then head down again. Actually, I didn't like my drawing there very much. Let's do this. I think it could back test here and then head down, something like that. Okay. I'm not 100% confident with that, but, I think that's reasonable given the astrology and everything else. Okay. So that's it for today. Again, my name is Stephen. I've been doing this for quite a while, researching other people's methods. Astrology has been used in the stock markets for 100 years, going back to this guy named W.D. Gann. So if you wanted to read about W.D. Gann, Gann, you would find that that's true. So I've read his books. I've looked at many other people's methodology. I've sort of developed my own, though. I have a master's degree in psychology. I definitely think looking at gold and silver and cryptocurrencies, given what could happen to the dollar over the next year, would be something to look at. This is my email if you'd like to email me. This is my new website, and let me make a comment about my website. So, many people listen to this vlog just to kind of learn something about astrology and events and, personalities that I analyze. And they're not interested in the markets at all. Okay, that's fine. But if you are interested in the markets, a quick way to get these key dates that I've been pointing out is to go to the website. This video will be posted at the website later this afternoon, so you can get both. I often go into more detail in the video than I do at the website, but you can quickly get these astro dates, there more quickly than the video. Okay, so I do accept Bitcoin if you feel so inclined. But that's it for today. Thank you for listening. It's likely I'll be back next Sunday. Every now and then I miss a Sunday, so consider subscribing. You'll get notified, etc. But thank you once again, and we'll talk to you next Sunday. Thanks.